Okay, so today we're at a major crossroads. If you look at the financial meltdown, clearly something major is happening. It may end up being just a blip on the radar screen, but we really can't afford to assume that. And so let's take a look at the big picture. Let's sort of put this into perspective. The United States and the Soviet Union were involved in a Cold War starting post-World War II, and that really created a very stable world pyramid that was very, very clear. You were either with us or you were against us. So it was very easy to recruit countries into our realm and to sort of control the way behavior existed around the globe. It was very simple, and it was only a matter of time before the Soviet Union collapsed. And so what happened was, after the Cold War ended, these sort of things take years sometimes to settle down. It's sort of like dropping something and the dust comes up in the air and so on. So power shifts because people no longer have to be with the United States. And so that creates uncertainty. That creates a questionable pyramid. Where is the power coming from? Where is it going? And the thing that's particularly disturbing about that is, let's look at consumption. One of our favorite American pastimes is consumption. And so one example that you've probably heard of is, say the United States has 4% of the population but consumes 25% of the resources. Now, we all know that that is not sustainable. We like to believe it is, and we like to hold our heads up and be in denial, but we know that that's not sustainable, certainly not in today's culture. But what's even more disturbing is that not only is the consumption moving overseas, the production is moving overseas. And so it used to be just outsourcing manufacturing and some engineering, but now it's becoming design, management, marketing. So at some point, it's very difficult to justify an economy on mortgage refinancing and financial measures and things like that. So that is a major, major concern. And to add to that is intellectual property is also moving from the first world to the third world. And so this has been going on for quite some time. For about 10 years is when sort of the inflection point came in. But we weren't aware of it because access to easy credit let us borrow money. And now that the spigot is turned off and dust goes up in the air, when the smoke clears, we may be living in a very, very different world. And so what's going to have to happen is a change. Imagine Americans redefining themselves from what they consume to who they are. That is a very, very difficult change to make. Let's look at the world pyramid structure. So we moved from the Cold War to a more distributed structure. So we have the first world, and we know each other pretty well: Europe, Japan, the United States. And we have the emerging tigers in China, which China in particular is focused really on a homogeneous culture, centralized control, and it actually works very, very well, but it's fundamentally different than the culture we have here. And right now we understand each other in terms of the way we do trade, but we don't know where that's going to go. It may be fine. We may work together. We may not. We don't really know. As we start to run out of resources, we may find out that it's difficult getting along. And then we have the other part of the pyramid, which is the chaos countries, India and Russia, really controlled by a small group of people. And so another thing that's a little bit disturbing is another fable. We like fables. Remember 2000, Doomsday in 2000? Another fable, 2012. It's always great having these years on the horizon, which happens to also be an election year. 2012, the Aztecs said the world is going to end. Doomsday is coming. Well, what it really means is that in order for a new world to come, the old world must end. That's part of evolution. In order to evolve, you must see the death of your childhood, your personal childhood. That's called evolution. So maybe it's not so bad, but let's look at some other fables that may give us some idea about what's going to happen. And these may or may not be true, but there's a lot of wisdom in these kind of fables. One is the book The Foundation, Isaac Asimov, who basically said that society goes through different stabilization structures over time, starting with war, then to religion, then to capitalism, which pretty much follows our world. He questioned what's next after capitalism because he predicted in the book that things would come apart. Astrological ages, every 2,000 years we go through a different age. We're entering the age of Aquarius. We've been in the age of Pisces. The age of Aquarius, I think, started in the 60s with the fifth dimension. So what are some of these ages? We discovered nature. 2,000 years later, we discovered science and building, the age of the pyramids. 2,000 years later, organized religion. And 2,000 years later, the age of Aquarius. What does that mean, the age of Aquarius? It's supposedly the age of connectivity. That may or may not be good, but whenever there's change, there's winners and there's losers. And things take a while to settle down. So an evolution in culture and thinking. Geographic-based thinking, because we were limited thousands of years ago. Then we had a diaspora of religion and culture, where people had more similarities with people in other countries than people in their own country. And now the internet has taken that to another level. We've got micro-cultures building, spiritual cultures, which are real spiritually. Cultures that are spiritual but more narcissistic spiritual, to make themselves feel better. So we have lost control of controlling the culture, the way people think, to ensure that we all think very similarly so we don't start killing each other and the pyramid doesn't start coming apart. So the question is, are we on a very narrow evolutionary path, incremental changes, or is there a big fork in the road coming in 2012 or 2015 or 2050 or whenever it may be, in our lifetime and our children's lifetime? So let's look at some possible future scenarios. One is nothing's going to happen. Everything's going to be perfectly fine. And that may very well be true, but we cannot afford to assume that. We're very, very good at risk management. Although that may not be clear from the current crisis, but we'll get to that in a minute. So one possible scenario is, imagine fight for survival, urban ghettos, which I don't like that idea. It's very unstable, and I like to be able to get in my car and drive somewhere without afraid of being attacked. A spiritual revolution. Every 500 or 1,000 years, there's a new religion. Maybe there'll be a new religion to band us all together, or maybe it'll be a very real spiritual revolution, or maybe it will be controlled by some of the folks we already work with, and it'll just have a different name. A federated world government. That could be stable. Another one, the Terminator movie. Genetic evolution, cyborgs, spreading out to the stars. Who says it's not our destiny to spread out to the stars? Another scenario, the Phoenix, death and rebirth. Kind of scary.